Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. Let's dive right in. So first question I have, rebates are going to go away at some point. When that happens, nobody's going to buy EVs, new or used. Why am I wrong?
Boy, I hope you're wrong. My entire business model is based on people buying used EVs. So yeah, it looks like they're saying end of the year, right? End of 2025. So at least it's not, I'd heard rumors it was going to be a 30-day notice any time. Yeah, I mean, it will change the market for us. We sell a lot of cars, a lot of used EVs that qualify for the $4,000 discount under the $25,000 mark. But there are a lot of EVs that we sell that never qualified in the first place, that are over $25,000. The other thing that I think is interesting, the gap between new and used gets greater because they were getting $7,500 off on new EVs. That also goes away. So if you're only selling used like I am, and both of the rebates are being removed, I actually benefit more from that because used becomes a greater value. But it's going to be a bumpy ride.
And just to be clear on the which rebates are getting removed, so we don't know exactly yet. It is December 31st, looks like it. Used gone, we think at that point. Leased rebates gone at that point. But there's actually some gray area for the new purchased vehicles. So it looks like maybe there's an exclusion that says like if you haven't yet sold 200,000 vehicles, then as a manufacturer you still get them through next year. So
the crappy ones will still get a rebate.
I'm not going to say any of these are crappy or not, but it's like the Rivians, Mercedes-Benz,
EVs,
Audis,
Alex.
Hondas, Subarus,
They haven't sold
Polestars.
200,000 units yet?
No, they haven't yet. Yeah.
I take that back. I retract.
So, Joel, I think you're the only one up here that sells new EVs.
Yeah, we sell both. But we sell tremendously more used EVs than new EVs. I think the new EV sales route is difficult overall, with or without the discount, because even with the discount, the cars are still objectively overpriced by comparison to what they are in the market. And I think used EVs are objectively well priced by what they are in the market. That's why they've been beneficial. So I think what really happens when the used tax credit gets removed is you have just a reset of the market value of those vehicles. And so in that period of time, like right now, it's kind of difficult because I'm not sure how you guys are operating, but for us, we're just trying to carry very limited amount of inventory on this market, that the cars that we specifically buy for the purpose of being tax credit cars. Because even though right now it's set to phase in December 31st, the current budget that just left the House or is being out of the committees and houses will remove this sooner. So in the meantime, if that happens, then they go away faster, which to me just means I have to sell those cars now while the rebate exists. Once it does, we'll just wait for the market to resettle, kind of like the dust at the bottom of a fish tank. Once that happens, they'll be where they are. I mean, the reality is these cars depreciate fast because they have a pretty specific use case for most people. It's not a one-car household solution for most people. And then the market will reflect that in its value. So these cars will just settle where they need to be, and that supply and demand curve will be met.
That makes sense. Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just say one other thing I forgot. The impact that it'll have as well, that $4,000 is acting as a down payment for a lot of folks that couldn't otherwise qualify for financing. And so I actually think that's probably going to have the biggest impact, is because you've got a lot of dealers that historically didn't like EVs. Then they realized there was a $4,000 down payment, and all of a sudden they loved EVs because they were able to sell them to credit challenged customers. And I just last thing, I find it interesting. I can't buy enough of them. I buy every car that qualifies for the tax credit that meets my criteria that's out there. And so it's just interesting to hear two different strategies in two different parts of the country that can both win for different reasons.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. The reality is, I think what the tax credit had done in the short term was basically set a ceiling on certain cars, and they raise in value, and other cars actually depreciated slightly to get under that threshold, where it almost became like a test of will in the auction of who has the best reconditioning process to get that last bid on an ID4 that's under 25 with all of your costs, And so that will naturally just go away. And some of those cars, like ID4s went up, for instance. I think that's a good example of that. I'm sure you're familiar with that. And I think they'll just come back down. You used to be able to pick those things up for 18, 19 pretty easy. They bubbled up to 21, 22, and that's what the bravery is who's gonna do 23 and be able to get it under 25 at retail. That will just naturally decrease.
All right, so that's a little bit on rebates. Now what's interesting, this picks up on something you said, Alex, is that you sell a bunch of used cars already, right, without the rebate. I think I'd heard somebody say 70%-ish of used cars today, right, are sold without the rebate. Certainly at CarMax, most of the ones we sell are over the $25,000 threshold. So we're selling a lot of EVs today. What are some things that are working to sell those used EVs that people can think about going forward, maybe even apply to new?
Yeah, as far as like strategies that we're using, for us, it's kind of a golden rule strategy. Our core values are based around my experience. So I'm new to the car industry. This is the first car business that I've owned since I was 16 when I detailed cars. I'm 51 now, and so our strategy is really universal for any business, I think, that just happens to sell a lot of EVs. And so, for example, if you want an out-the-door price from us over the phone or in text, we'll give you one in 3 minutes because it's really simple. It's our doc fee plus the state-imposed fees, and there's nothing more. There's no surprises. And
It's actually very similar to the CarMax model, so
yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Yeah, but it's not super similar with a lot of our competitors. Additionally, we don't require any other, you don't have to do anything else to get those prices. We don't care if you pay cash. We don't care if you have a trade-in, all these other things. Also, when you come into our dealerships, they're very physically different. They look different. Anyway, I won't go into tons of detail, but they look and feel different. They're more relaxed. And then the buying process, you can get in and out of one of my stores in 20 minutes if you want to. It's all digital. You only work with one person. There's no F&I. There's no back room. There's no bouncing around. There's no 3 hours experiences. There's no hard pushes on back-end products. Just none of that exists in my company because I hated that. I detested that as a customer. I mean, I would sit down with the F&I person, and I would sit down at the table, and I'd look them right in the eye, and I would say, every single question you're going to ask me, the answer is no. I will pay sales tax and your doc fee, and that's it. And you would watch the blood just go right out of their face because that's how
You're a real dream customer, Alex.
Yeah, they hated my guts. So having had that experience for decades, that's our strategy, is to treat people like that and get a reputation for treating people like that. And over time, that's ended up selling a lot of EVs.
One of the things I was going to say we've observed about the used market versus the new market is that counterintuitively, there's actually more transparency in the used market than there is in new. I mean, just like, what's the price of a car? Like, it's a lot more transparent for used than it is for a new vehicle. And then within EVs, it's like, what's the range on this car? Well, like, with a used vehicle, we have all the data to show here's exactly how far this car will go. Here's how far it'll go in different weather conditions. And, on the new side, all you have is the EPA range, which is just mostly wrong at the beginning. And so I think that there's an opportunity to take that transparency from, on price and range and charging time and everything like that we've been doing on the used side and bring it to new. And I think there's a good acceleration there.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question and to completely echo Alex's point, it's the answer of how you do something differently is you don't, right? I mean, everything you just described is just how you run a good dealership overall and how to sell well. I mean, CarMax has proved that a long time. I think a lot of the best operators in the country do the same thing. It's about transparency first, one price shop. Here are all the products that we sell. You want them or you don't. I'm good either way. And that's just good practice. And I think you're just applying the same lot. Like we kind of unnecessarily apply that to EVs as an exclusive market because it's new. But these are old tactics that work for a new product. And to me, like our secret to success with used EVs is it's just the same. Like it's the Carfax report is different effectively. You know what I mean? So like the data set that matters to the consumer inherently has different points in it. But push comes to shove, you're just trying to put together a great car deal, make sure the customer's happy and keep them on the road. Doesn't matter if it's powered by gas or electricity. I mean, so like you overcomplicate it or try to separate those two things. That's where I think things fall apart for other dealers, where it really should just be this one seamless process, regardless of the propulsion of the vehicle, right? And CarMax has proved that time and time again for years, and Carvana's like kind of built off that same momentum of, look, we're trying to solve the process here. What we're selling is actually kind of irrelevant, and so like the difference between new and used overall. But I completely agree with your point. Like, as someone who's new to new car sales, like the new car business is, for lack of a better way to put it, like dirty by comparison to the used business, right? Used is all about transparency. One price, this is what you get, come in, come out, you're out. Just to your point, try to call any new dealership around here, including mine, by the way, which I'm not ashamed to say, it's just we're trying to learn it. You can't get a price on a new car. It's borderline impossible because the concern is they're gonna take that price and go to someone else and just keep racing to the bottom, because you're effectively in commodity sales in the new business. That's not the case in used, right?
In used, we say every car is a snowflake.
Every car, exactly. This is the only one with that dent, right? That's it. That's why it costs this exact amount, and take it or leave it. You can find another one, but it's going to be different. So it's all about experience. So you just have to apply the same thing to new. And to your point, the difference between what consumers have come to expect from an EPA report on an ICE vehicle is just like, okay, I know it says 30, but it's probably like 25. But who cares, right? It's like that impact of that doesn't actually dramatically change their lifestyle or how they're going to drive. On an EV, it matters. Like effective range versus stated range is the difference between buying this car and that car. And so like that's a big gap that, Recurrent has done a good job helping us solve because, for a long time before all this credit stuff, we were picking up, our buyers would buy a Leaf and it's like, man, it's, it's $7,000. Like that's such a good deal. And you get it and like the effective range is like 45 miles. And it's like, wow, man, that's not such a great deal.
Less in the
right.
cold.
And it's just like, okay, like, and all those cars end up coming back, and so we're at the gap, I think, in the EV space becomes a lack of consumer education and understanding. We're all fundamentally on this board understand that we need to detach the value of a vehicle from mileage because that's an irrelevant metric on an EV. Try explaining that to a customer. Like, oh, this Tesla costs more because even though it's 100,000 miles, it's only been charged in phase 2 and it's only been stored in a mild climate, where this one was up in upstate New York, only supercharged its whole life. Yeah, it's got 10,000 miles, but the battery health is worse. Like that conversation is not going to go very far.
Yeah, completely agree. So transparent process. But with EVs, customers do ask, like you said, Joel, a different set of questions. I mean, these are some of the ones we found, right, that our customers at CarMax ask exactly the same questions, right, that they ask at your dealerships and your dealerships, I'm sure. How are you guys responding to these questions?
Yeah, and actually, I thought of something. I guess my answer was kind of macro. I'm gonna give some micro answers now because I think that's more strategic, pinpoint things a little more. Because my answer was like, yeah, we do that, anywhere. It's true because it's a core value for us. But one of the other core values is we are the experts, and so in where we operate, we want everybody in our business, no matter the role, to know more about EVs than anybody else they know in their life. And so, when people come to us, we can answer any question about every car. And in addition,
How do you hire for those roles when you're looking at whatever you call them, sales consultant, sales associate? What's the profile?
yeah, we call them EV experts. That's their title in sales, anyway. And so that kind of reinforces that. And so, we talk about it all the time. They follow certain people on X and on LinkedIn. We all subscribe to certain newsletters. We've got keywords that we get news alerts on, and everybody in the company does that. And we pass that around in Slack. We've got a channel for that. When something new gets announced or something new is happening or something new is changing, everybody's just tuned into it because that's core value for us. But there's other things that dealers can do. And I've said this to many, many of my friends and those that I've met. Look, either be all in or all out. And all in can mean you just have one or two people in your organization that love EVs. They like driving them. They think they're fun. Maybe they own one and they park it in the back and hide it, or something like that. But have somebody or a group that does that, and then have the resources for it. Include chargers and installation in the purchase if they want. Roll it into the financing. Be able to do all these little things that make it. Hey, they really know what they're talking about. They really are the experts. And you can layer that onto maybe some of the other things we talked about. That's a strategy or a tactic that'll help you sell more EVs.
Joel, I'd be curious in your take.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with that to a certain extent. I think your business in particular, I think that is your value proposition, right?
Yeah, it's all we sell,
right.
which is not fair.
And so, I think a majority of dealers are going to sell a mix, right? And I think that's going to. So I'm not sure I fully buy into the premise that you need someone dedicated exclusively to that, because I kind of wouldn't want that for me, right? I wouldn't want. If I walked into a dealership and they said, oh, you're interested in this kind of propulsion, you go to this person, right? I'm always wary of breaking anything when it comes to the process. I want it to be the same streamlined process online as in store, across everything that we do for selling every car. That's why, for instance, at our dealerships, we don't have F&I offices, right? It's one person all the way through, and it's built into the same process. Everyone gets paid on the whole deal, right? And that I want to make sure that seamlessness doesn't get broken apart. So, but I'm also different because, it's impossible to be an expert on every car when you sell so many used cars, similar to the way you guys are. The reality is you just lean into having as much information available to the consumer and the salesperson at the same time. Like we make sure that our website has every bit of data I can possibly fit onto it, so that there's no secret portal that someone logs into of like, oh, that's what's online. Let me check the actual real stuff in the back end and show you something that you didn't know before. To make sure that the customer feels welcomed into the process. So fundamentally, the questions that are being asked by your consumers are the same that are asked by us, and that's where partners like Recurrent and other vendors in the space help answer those questions. The same way that a consumer would ask those questions about an ICE vehicle maybe 10 years ago, and now they've kind of mentally been trained of, I'm going to pre-check all this information. I come in knowing that. And when you sell as many used cars as we do and as many cars as you guys do, I'm sure, the reality is it's not like a new car store where you have a knowledge of core product. It's basically impossible to understand every trim, every mileage, every distinction between
There's no way you could train people on that.
Right. You just have to have that information available and learn with the consumer and present yourself as someone who's helpful. And it's like for us, we consider our consumers more concierge, or our salespeople more concierge agents that help them with the sale. That's why they're non-commissioned. So it's just a different vibe.
But you must have some people who are just a little bit more into EVs, and so they're just. It's likely if somebody comes in looking, they're going to be better at closing them, right?
100%.
Right.
Yeah. But I mean, and that inherently will always happen, but that's just part of the training, right? So like to your point, I think you even said this a long time ago, and we immediately implemented it when we started selling volume of EVs. Just get in one and drive it, right? There's no other way to do it. Everyone who does it, they're just like, oh, this is great. I get it. This is fun. It's zippy. I get all the benefits here. But let's be clear, like, we were kind of joking before about good and bad EVs. There's a difference between cars ground up built to be an EV and cars that were made to like handle CAFE regulations. And so like there's a distinction between those consumers buying those cars and, or for us, like those are the consumers who leave with an EV versus the ones that came in to buy one, if you know what I mean. And that kind of leans into your point about that tax credit being helpful. Those are the cars I'm worried about. Like it's those Konas, those 500Es, those cars that we kind of look at it with like a little bit, I'm not sure. But you got a customer who's $7,000 upside down. Tax credit works out.
I have a kid who's about to get his driver's license, his learner's permit, and I think those worn down Leafs in 500Es are a great choice for a 16-year-old.
100%. I mean, you
Can't
don't have
get
to be
too
worried
far.
about them driving too far.
That's right.
They can't make it.
Yeah, in terms of transparency, so at CarMax, we're more like you, Joel. We don't have the luxury of having just EV experts, or at least we haven't set it up that way. So one of the ways we've tried to overcome that is we have an EV hub on CarMax.com, where we've just poured in as much information as we can, as much helpful information to answer questions like these and other questions to help both our store associates, right, and our shoppers be prepared. One related topic.
I'll
Go ahead,
just
Alex.
say, just gently, I can't even begin to count how many people have come into our store that said, I went to car dealership A, and the person that helped me had no idea how it worked. And
totally agree.
they
It's not
left
surprising.
because of that. And so the only reason I say usually you'll have somebody on your staff that wants to be that person. They love them. And so not that the rest of your staff hates them, but they just naturally aren't that interested in them. So I would just encourage you to maybe identify them and give them the opportunity, because the customer will have a better experience. They'll be treated great by all of your concierges, right? But if they don't know answers to questions, or they don't even bring up things that this customer doesn't think to ask, and they find out later, ultimately that experience is a little bit worse either now or later. And so I still would encourage you to consider having a leader in that space. That's all I sell. It's not fair to even remotely consider you guys to have a team of people that just do that. So anyway, just it's a thought of what we've heard.
I completely agree with you, and that is the right way of doing it. And to Scott's point, like that, you have that person on staff who's just like they own a Tesla, so they're probably excited about it. And like that naturally will happen. I agree with you.
Yeah. So we have to address the elephant in the room, or the elephant on the panel, which is you, Scott. So you're the only one not selling new and used EVs. You're selling stuff to those of us who sell new and used EVs. So you don't get to answer this question, but for the rest of us on the panel, why are we working with Recurrent? What are they helping us solve?
I mean, again, it's Carfax auto check kind of thing. It's a necessary requirement to answer questions to the consumers of what they're looking for to understand what their EV can and can't do, how it fits in their life. I mean, the amount of resources that have become naturally available are critical to the sell of that vehicle, right? And you expand that out and just trying to be specific to that car. It's unique. It's building off of what I had mentioned earlier, which is convincing effectively a consumer to detach their understanding of how ICE cars work and their relationship to mileage, to focus on battery health and how that car works, and effective range versus impacts of climate, versus the downsides of EVs, which could be more frequent tire changes and how that works. There's that misnomer that these cars never require maintenance. It's like, well, they're not, mythical beasts. Like, they do require something, right? And so you just have to break that down and be specific. And so that means a different data set that you have to share with your consumer to ease their worries or increase the value of this vehicle versus that one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a competitive advantage for me. I can show, we've said, this is something we train on. When somebody's looking at a competitor's car, we say, what's the battery score on that? They say, I don't know what you mean. Aha, let me show you what the battery score is. And we do it and they don't. And so for us, it's a competitive advantage. And I'm predicting right now that Carfax acquires Recurrent at some point because we call it the Carfax of battery reports.
You heard it here first.
We call it that.
I agree.
Because people understand what a Carfax is. Or CarMax, sorry. I just totally screwed that up. You're CarMax, damn. So I messed that up. But
there's CarMax too. The
my
lip balm, sometimes people-
prediction stays the same. I do not recant that like I did my other statement. But that's the easiest way to understand it. This is the history of the battery. You're used to the history of the car. And on our website, it actually has the Carfax report and it has the Recurrent report. And they're right next to each other.
Yeah, it's the same.
Still buy them, though.
There you go. Thank you. So, same thing for us, competitive advantage. And at CarMax, just because of our scale, we tend to build a lot of things in-house and a lot of even data products in-house. And there are times when it does not make sense at all to do this. And this was the case. Just working with Scott, you guys have something like 750 million miles of EV data that they've built up over the years, under all different conditions. And that's something that we just get to plug into and use, which is awesome, on both CarMax.com and Edmunds.com.
Yeah, I mean, to even echo that point, an anecdotal story, we have customers coming in saying, well, this one has 100. And the reality, they don't even know what the battery score actually is, but it's a higher number than the one next to it that's 97. And that inherently creates more value. So just push comes to shove, consumers are looking for validation of the quality of that vehicle. And if that's backed by real data and then presented to the consumer, it increases the value of the product. So it's a net win. We're not at the point yet, which I know this has come up before, where SRPs are being filtered by that stuff, and it's not pushing to third-party sites. I know you guys are working on that as well. Just more presentation, just like Carfax did, right? I mean, the difference between Carfax and AutoCheck is marketing. And so the difference between everyone else is going to be the same thing.
Just looking for some live questions here. All right, so here's one. How do you overcome range anxiety? How are you advertising them differently than a non-EV? That's a hard question for you to answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't advertise non-EVs, so I'll punt.
It's hard. That's the thing is EVs are inherently not, I don't think for most people, a one vehicle solution. So you have ways to go. But I mentioned before that the reality in this climate is there's a lack of education. I mean, if you poll even maybe this room, but definitely out in the street, what's the difference between an extended range electric vehicle, an electric vehicle, a plug-in hybrid, a hybrid, and an ICE vehicle? First off, they're going to say, what the hell is ICE? And then after that, understanding the difference between all of those things it's non-existent in that market. And so, we've had a customer return an i3 because the range extender kicked on and they thought they bought an electric vehicle, right? And it's like, well, you did, and that generates more electricity.
It was like a week later.
Yeah,
right
it was a week later because
Yeah.
they charged it at home. I don't know if you've ever driven one of those cars, but the little motorcycle engine kicks on and generates electricity for the car to continue. It's a range extender. It's actually a very expensive option, but that's how little there's understanding this market. So take that a step further with range anxiety. It's most of our cars that we sell are either credit challenge consumers where it's like you can leave with this car or this car, and the EV has more value because of the quality of the product, and it fits their financial situation, or it's the second vehicle for them.
I was going to say, we had one of our investors, a huge EV fanboy, basically, very, very excited about the F-150 Lightning when that came out. And he lives in Boston and he likes to go skiing in Vermont. And he got it in the summer, it was great. And then all of a sudden, as he's going up to his ski cabin in Vermont, it's getting less and less and less range. And he had no idea. And he returned it, in January, brand new truck. And he was like, this doesn't fit my needs. And he just didn't know that wasn't, he didn't, even an EV fanboy who's an investor in our company didn't sort of realize that was a thing that happened. So just all about expectation setting.
He didn't buy the 511A extended battery package that's available on the Ford Lightning, which extends the battery about 90 miles. So see, as an EV expert, I can say that's not the right truck for you.
But even then, you got to tell the customer when it's cold, it works less good. That's that conversation is hard.
I'm going to put that on a T-shirt.
I
When
know.
these are cold, they work less good. I like that.
I mean, by the way,
That's good.
the same thing's true for ICE vehicles.
trademark.
He's got another good one. Your more miles. More miles does not equal more bad. Sorry, I want to
that's
going to be
more
on a
miles,
t-shirt
more bad,
too.
right?
Yeah.
That doesn't
He's
apply.
going to be on the ASOTU shirts next year.
For sure, that's got to
Yeah.
be that. Yeah.
In terms of advertising them differently, just at CarMax, we don't do that. I mean, it's similar, whether it's an ICE or EV vehicle, we merchandise them in the best way and then just try to educate the consumer and help them find the best car for them, really.
The difference is a Recurrent report, I guess, right?
that's
there's that difference, and then we also put in the banner if it qualifies for the IRA tax credit.
That's right.
Because you can't exclude that from the price, or you shouldn't exclude that from the price.
That's a whole nother panel of
You just set
dealers
off,
committing
Alex.
tax fraud around the nation. Give me an hour to talk about that.
All right, but come back later for that one. So we only have a couple of minutes left. If you had to give just a few words of advice to somebody who wants to sell more EVs in the next 12 months, what would your closing thoughts be? Joel, why don't we start with you?
Just don't overthink it. That's really it. It's a car. It's got a key. It's got an engine. And there's a couple of little weird things with it, but overall, it's the same thing. If you had a diesel versus a gas car, or a hybrid versus a just straight ICE, just don't overthink it. Get into it. Jump in with 2 feet. Buy them at the same price. Consider the same things with its relationship to book values. You're going to loan it in the same way. Make sure that your technicians have some form of education to handle that. But even that isn't that hard. So overall, I just think people just build these things up like they're such complicated machinery, and I just don't fundamentally think that they are.
Mine would be, there are 2 million Tesla drivers that bought before Elon went crazy, that are now sitting there going, oh, I don't know how my values align with this brand anymore. And there are an awful lot of people selling their Tesla now and buying a different EV because there's a really strong loyalty to the fuel type, but
we've
not so
seen
much a loyalty to the brand.
We've seen appraisals of Teslas creep up at CarMax over the past 2, 3, 4 months.
Yeah. And so I think I would really orient around, like, how am I going to hit those early adopter Tesla owners that are now looking for their next car would have been a Tesla, and they would have traded it back to Tesla and upgraded, and now they're bringing their Tesla into the dealership and buying something different.
So I actually don't agree with that. I think that's very geographic, because I've never sold more Teslas. Demand's never been higher for me with Tesla. And so that's not happening at all where I am. And you just said values have gone up.
We've seen more Tesla appraisals, but we're also still selling a ton of Teslas. So there's a buyer and a seller for every one.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so it depends. I mean, I joke all the time, when I got into the car business, I didn't realize I was getting into politics. And I had my first protester last Saturday, and I invited him inside, and we gave him hot dogs because it was during my grand opening. So we became friends, and it was fine. But that was my one and only since all this stuff. So I think it's really depending on where you are, that is either occurring or not occurring. So, but beyond that, again, I'll say, I think you either need to be all in or all out. Now, all in doesn't mean you become an EV dealership. All in doesn't mean that you force or ask everybody. It's not that at all. I just am saying that a sliver of your business, you need to have some chargers on site. You need to have some chargers, like maybe a charger on the wall in the showroom that you can point to. You've got to have an electrician, just somebody, a third party that can install those for them. You have to have somebody on your staff that doesn't just know about them, but drives one and likes them and is passionate about them. And so you can have the all-in can be very small. But if you just don't like them, I mean, you're all in this room, so maybe you do, or you're not really sure about them and you're on the fence about them, just wait. I mean, the market's not going anywhere. And if you're not really going to go in that hard, you're not going to lose or win that much. So just kind of wait if it's not really your thing. That's okay. But if you are going to do it, you want to get into the market, then invest in it to some degree.
I want to hear yours too, though, Terrence.
You're spot on.
You got to
we're
answer
talking
the
about
same
what,
question.
10% of the market at its peak right now? It's not that. Your all in is, if for a regular dealership, will be 10% of your sales.
That's going to be another T-shirt next year. If you're not into it, wait. Yeah. No, I guess last word. At CarMax, our approach is just try to provide the best customer experience, right? If it's an ICE vehicle, great. If it's a diesel vehicle, if it's an electric vehicle, there might be some more consumer education you want to do, but otherwise, great experience is going to win the day every time. And I think that's it. So thank you for attending. Thanks to the panelists. Great job. I'm sure we'll be happy to answer any questions afterwards.